I've been holding this inside for so long, and today I need you to hear it. There's something you don't know, something only I can tell you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to say might change everything between us. I want to begin with something honest, something simple. I am not the same person I used to be. And I say that not with regret, but with gratitude. Love changes you. Loss changes you. Silence changes you. There was a time when I believed that loving someone meant holding on tightly, afraid that if I loosened my grip, everything would disappear. But love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's about standing beside someone and saying, I choose you even when life is uncertain. I have loved deeply. I have lost deeply. And somewhere between the breaking and the healing, I found a different version of myself. The old me chased approval. The old me feared loneliness. The old me thought strength meant never falling apart. But love taught me something greater. It taught me that vulnerability is strength, that scars are proof we cared, and that sometimes becoming a better person means letting the old version of yourself quietly fade away. I am not the same person. I am softer, but stronger, more patient, but more aware, still searching, but no longer lost. Because when you love with your whole heart, you don't stay the same. You grow. And today, I want to talk about that growth, about how love transforms us, reshapes us, and sometimes breaks us, only to build us into someone braver, kinder, and more real than we ever imagined. There was a time when I measured my worth by how much I could endure in silence. I believed strength meant carrying everything alone. I thought love was something you proved by sacrificing yourself piece by piece until there was nothing left but exhaustion and a smile that hid the truth. Back then, I confused survival with living. I confused attachment with devotion. I confused losing myself with loving someone else. But life has a quiet way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. I have loved in ways that were pure and reckless at the same time. I have given my heart without knowing how to protect it. I have trusted people with the most fragile parts of me, hoping they would handle them gently. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And in those moments when things fell apart, I felt like I was falling apart too. The old version of me would have chased what was leaving. I would have begged for clarity, for reassurance, for one more chance to fix something that was never entirely mine to fix. I thought love meant fighting until you had nothing left. I thought it meant holding on even when your hands were bleeding. But somewhere between heartbreak and healing, something shifted inside me. I began to understand that love is not about clinging. It is about choosing. It is about waking up every day and deciding to show up with honesty. And if someone cannot meet you in that space, it is not your job to shrink yourself to fit their limitations. I am not the same person. I used to be afraid of being alone. Silence felt like rejection. Empty rooms felt like proof that I was not enough. So I filled my life with noise, conversations that didn't go deep, relationships that didn't go deep, relationships that didn't feel safe, distractions that kept me from facing my own reflection. I kept moving so I wouldn't have to sit with the ache inside my chest. But eventually, the noise faded. The distractions lost their power, and I was left alone with myself. That was the hardest part, to look at yourself without excuses, to admit where you settled, to admit where you tolerated less than you deserved, to admit that sometimes you accepted half-hearted love because you didn't fully believe you were worthy of something whole. I had to forgive myself for that. I had to forgive myself for staying too long, for ignoring red flags because I saw potential, for believing promises without consistent action, for confusing chemistry with compatibility, for mistaking intensity for intimacy. Love taught me those lessons gently at first, then firmly, then undeniably, and pain, as cruel as it felt, became a teacher. I learned that loving someone does not mean abandoning yourself. I learned that boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to healthier connections. I learned that saying this hurts me is not weakness, it is courage. I learned that walking away can be an act of self respect, not failure. The person I used to be would have stayed quiet to keep the peace. I would have swallowed my feelings to avoid conflict. I would have apologized for being too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. I shrank myself so others could feel comfortable. Now, I understand that my depth is not something to apologize for. My emotions are not burdens. My sensitivity is not a flaw. It is proof that I feel deeply, that I care deeply, that I love deeply, and that is not something I am willing to dim anymore. I am not the same person. I have seen what happens when you ignore your intuition. It starts as a whisper, a small discomfort in your chest, a quiet voice that says something isn't right. But if you silence it long enough, it becomes a storm. It becomes anxiety. It becomes a resentment. It becomes a version of you that feels lost and disconnected. I used to ignore that whisper because I didn't want to seem difficult. I didn't want to risk losing someone by asking hard questions. I thought love meant trust without doubt, but real trust is not blind. It is built on truth, on transparency, on mutual effort. Now, when my intuition speaks, I listen. I have learned to pause instead of react, to breathe instead of assume, to communicate instead of withdraw. These changes did not happen overnight. They came from mistakes, from sleepless nights, from replaying conversations in my head and wishing I had spoken up. Growth is not glamorous. It is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you would rather ignore. There were moments when I had to admit that I was not only the one who was hurt, I was also the one who hurt others. My fear made me distant. My pride made me defensive. My unhealed wounds made me guarded. I had to take responsibility for that. It is easy to blame others for the pain we feel. It is harder to recognize the patterns we bring into our relationships. The old me believed that if someone left, it meant I was not enough. The new me understands that sometimes people leave because the version of you they met is no longer the version you are becoming. And that is not a tragedy. That is evolution. Love has changed the way I see myself. I no longer chase validation from people who are unsure about me. I no longer beg for clarity from those who thrive in confusion. I no longer try to convince someone to see my worth. If they cannot see it, that is not my failure. I have discovered that self-respect is quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It shows up in small decisions, in choosing not to send that message, in walking away from conversations that feel manipulative, in protecting your peace even when it disappoints others. Peace used to feel boring to me. I was addicted to emotional highs and dramatic reconciliations. I thought passion had to be chaotic, but chaos is not passion, it is instability. Now I crave consistency, it's instability. Now I crave consistency, I crave honesty, I crave a love that feels like home, not a battlefield. I am not the same person. There was a time when I defined myself by who I was to someone else. I was a partner, a supporter, a fixer, a listener. I poured so much energy into being what others needed that I forgot to ask myself what I needed, what I want, what makes me feel safe, what makes me feel alive. Those questions used to scare me because I didn't know the answers. I had built my identity around giving, and giving is beautiful, but not when it leaves you empty. I had to learn how to receive, receiving love, receiving help, receiving kindness without feeling like I owed something in return. That was uncomfortable. At first, I was used to earning affection. I was used to proving my value. But love is not a transaction. It is not something you bargain for. It is something you allow. Allowing myself to be loved without conditions changed me. It softened me in places where I'd grown hard.
It reminded me that I am worthy of effort, that I deserve someone who chooses me clearly, not reluctantly.
That I am allowed to expect respect, honesty, and emotional availability. The old version of me would have settled for potential. The new version values presence. Potential is a promise of what could be. Presence is proof of what is, and I choose what is. I am not the same person who once feared endings. I have come to understand that endings are not always failures. Sometimes they are protection. Sometimes they are redirection. Sometimes they are invitations to become someone stronger. There were relationships that felt like forever until they weren't. And when they ended, I felt like a part of me had been erased. But as time passed, I realized that what was erased were illusions. The love that was real did not disappear. It transformed into lessons, into resilience, into clarity. I no longer romanticize what hurt me. I no longer romanticize what hurt me. I no longer replay memories and ignore the pain attached to them. I can acknowledge that something was beautiful and still admit that it was not right for me. That balance is maturity. I am not the same person who once begged to be understood. Now I focus on understanding myself. I ask myself why certain patterns feel familiar. I explore my fears instead of running from them. I sit with discomfort instead of running it. Healing is not linear. There are days when old wounds resurface, days when a song, a place, or a memory pulls me back into feelings I thought I had outgrown. But the difference now is that I do not drown in those feelings. I observe them. I let them move through me. I have learned that emotions are temporary visitors. They are not permanent residents. Love has made me braver, not because it guaranteed happiness, but because it required vulnerability. To love is to risk, to open your heart knowing it could break. And yet, I still believe it is worth it. What has changed is how I love. I no longer love from a place of fear. I no longer love hoping someone will complete me. I am already whole. Love is not about filling a void. It is about sharing abundance. When I say I am not the same person, I mean that I have shed layers of insecurity. I have released the need to control outcomes. I have stopped trying to predict every possibility just to protect myself from disappointment. Disappointment is part of life. So is joy. So is uncertainty. I have made peace with the unknown. There was a time when I needed guarantees. I needed promises about forever. But forever is not built on words. It is built on actions repeated daily. It is built on mutual growth, on shared values, on respect. And if something is meant to last, it will require effort from both sides. I no longer carry relationships alone. I no longer overextend myself to prove loyalty. Loyalty should not require self-betrayal. I am not the same person who once believed love had to hurt to be real. Love can challenge you, yes. It can push you to grow, but it should not consistently diminish you. If you constantly feel anxious, insecure, or unworthy in someone's presence, that is not love teaching you humility. That is love asking you to pay attention. Now, I pay attention to how I feel after conversations. I pay attention to consistency. I pay attention to effort. And I have become someone who values emotional safety as much as passion. I have also learned to love myself in ways I never did before. Not in an arrogant way, not in a self-absorbed way, but in a compassionate way. I speak to myself gently. I forgive my past mistakes. I acknowledge my progress. The old me was my harshest critic. Every failure felt like confirmation of inadequacy. Every rejection felt personal. But growth has taught me that rejection is often redirection. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not every connection is meant to last. And that is okay. I am not the same person who once feared being misunderstood. If someone misinterprets my boundaries as coldness, that is their perception. I know my heart, I know my intentions, and I know that protecting my peace is not cruelty. Love has refined me. It has stripped away illusions and left behind clarity. It has shown me what I will no longer tolerate and what I deeply value. I value honesty, even when it is uncomfortable. I value effort, even in small gestures. I value presence, even in silence. I am not the same person who once clung to who I used to be. I honor that version of me. He loved with everything he had. He tried his best with what he knew, but he did not yet understand his worth. Now I do. And that understanding changes everything. It changes how I show up. It changes what I accept. It changes what I walk away from. It changes the way I love. I love with openness, but not desperation. I love with passion, but not self abandonment. I love with hope, but not illusion. And every day, I continue becoming someone who chooses growth over comfort, truth over fear, and self respect over temporary validation. I continue learning, unlearning, and allowing myself to evolve into someone who loves deeply without losing himself, someone who stands firmly in his values while keeping his heart open, someone who understands that change is not a betrayal of who he was, but a commitment to who he is becoming. And in that ongoing becoming, I keep discovering new layers of strength, tenderness, and courage that remind me that transformation is not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding, a quiet revolution within the soul that keeps moving, shaping, breathing, and asking me to step forward with honesty, with vulnerability, with a willingness to embrace whatever comes next. And so I keep walking into that unknown space with faith in the man I am still becoming, carrying love not as a burden, but as a light that guides me through every uncertain step, every risk, every open door that waits for me to decide whether I am ready to enter. And I am learning that readiness is not about perfection, but about presence, about showing up fully as I am without masks, without apologies, without the need to be the person I used to be, because I am not the same person anymore, and I am still becoming. Growth is a quiet decision. It does not arrive with applause. It does not announce itself to the world. It begins in the most intimate space, the space between who you were and who you are trying to become. Letting the old you go is not about rejection. It is about gratitude. It is about looking at the former version of yourself with compassion and saying, you did what you could with what you knew. It is about honoring the survival patterns that once protected you, even if they no longer serve you. There was a version of me who believed love had to be earned. He tried harder than necessary. He stayed longer than he should have. He mistook being needed for being valued. And for a long time, that felt like purpose. But growth asks uncomfortable questions. Are you loved for who you are or for how much you give? Are you staying because it is right or because it is familiar? Letting go of the old you means answering those questions honestly. It means recognizing that some habits were born from insecurity, some reactions were rooted in fear, some attachments were tied to loneliness rather than alignment. And that realization can be painful because the old you feels safe, even if he was anxious, even if he was overthinking every message, even if he was losing sleep trying to decode someone's silence. He was familiar, and familiarity is comforting, even when it hurts. Growth requires stepping into unfamiliar territory. It requires saying no when you used to say yes. It requires silence when you used to chase. It requires boundaries where there were none. The first time you choose yourself, it feels unnatural. You question it. You wonder if you are being selfish. You replay the moment in your head and ask if you were too firm, too distant, too much. But growth is not about being less. It is about being true. Letting the old you go means releasing the need for constant validation. It means understanding that not everyone will understand your transformation. Some people were comfortable with the version of you that tolerated more, the version that did not question, the version that accepted inconsistency. When you grow, you disrupt expectations, and not everyone celebrates that. Some will say you have changed, as if change is betrayal, but change is evidence of awareness. It is proof that you are paying attention to your own needs, your own patterns, your own heart. There was a time when I avoided difficult conversations. I would rather carry silent resentment than risk conflict. I thought peace meant avoiding tension, but that was not peace. That was suppression. Now I understand that true peace sometimes requires confrontation. It requires honesty. It requires expressing what hurts and what matters. The old me feared abandonment. So he overcompensated. He gave more, explained more, forgave faster than he healed. He believed that if he was patient enough, loving enough, understanding enough, he could prevent someone from leaving. But growth teaches you something profound. You cannot control who stays. You can only control how you show up. Letting go of the old you means releasing the illusion of control. It means accepting that love is a choice made by two people, not a project managed by one. It means realizing that you are not responsible for someone else's inability to meet you emotionally. Growth begins when you stop trying to be indispensable and start being authentic. Authenticity can feel risky. It means revealing your standards. It means admitting you want consistency. It means saying you deserve clarity. It means walking away when those things are absent. And walking away is one of the hardest forms of growth because the old you whispers, stay. Maybe it will change. Maybe if you try a little harder. The old you remembers the good moments, the laughter, the connection, the potential. But growth listens to patterns, not promises. It pays attention to actions. It values alignment over intensity. Letting the old you go also means forgiving yourself for not knowing better, forgiving yourself for ignoring red flags, forgiving yourself for confusing chemistry with compatibility. Self-forgiveness is not denial. It is acceptance. It is not denial. It is acceptance. It is saying, I was learning and you are still learning. Growth is not a straight line. There are moments when you fall back into old habits, moments when you miss the comfort of familiarity, moments when loneliness tempts you to return to what once felt close. But each time you choose differently, even in small ways, you strengthen the new version of yourself, the version who pauses before reacting, the version who asks for clarity instead of assuming, the version who values peace over drama. Letting the old you go does not mean you erase your past. It means you integrate it. You take the lessons without carrying the pain as identity. You are not your heartbreak. You are not your mistakes. You are not the moments when you felt unworthy. You are the awareness that came after. Growth also changes how you see love. You stop chasing sparks and start seeking stability. You stop being impressed by grand gestures and start valuing consistency. You stop romanticizing emotional turbulence and start appreciating calm. Calm used to feel unfamiliar to me. It felt almost suspicious. I was used to intensity, to highs and lows, but growth teaches you that love does not have to feel like chaos to be real. It can feel steady. It can feel safe. It can feel quiet. Letting the old you go means accepting that you deserve that kind of love. It means no longer entertaining connections that leave you confused. It means no longer shrinking your eds to appear low maintenance. It means recognizing that asking for respect is not demanding, it is healthy. There will be people who cannot meet you in your growth, not because they are bad, but because they are on a different path. And part of growth is allowing that distance without resentment. You do not need to prove your evolution to anyone. Your boundaries will speak. Your peace will speak. Your choices will speak. Your choices will speak. Guilt for changing. Guilt for outgrowing certain dynamics. Guilt for choosing solitude over dysfunction. Solitude is not emptiness, it is space. Space to rediscover who you are without external noise. Space to rebuild your standards. Space to reconnect with your own voice. In that space, you begin to hear yourself clearly. You begin to recognize what truly matters to you, not what impresses others, not what looks good from the outside, but what feels aligned internally. Growth is alignment. It is when your actions reflect your values, when your words match your boundaries, when your love includes yourself. The old you may have tolerated less. The old you may have settled for half-hearted effort. The old you may have believed that asking for more was unrealistic. But growth teaches you that your standards are not unrealistic if they reflect your worth. Letting the old you go is not a single decision. It is daily. It is choosing not to respond to breadcrumbs. It is choosing not to chase mixed signals. It is choosing to invest where effort is mutual. And sometimes it is choosing to be alone rather than misaligned. There is strength in that choice. There is strength in that choice, a quiet strength, the kind that does not need validation, the kind that knows that temporary loneliness is better than long-term dissatisfaction. Growth begins when you realize that love should not require you to abandon yourself. It should expand you, not diminish you. It should challenge you to grow, not pressure you to shrink. Letting the old you go is an act of self-respect. It is trusting that who you are becoming is worth the discomfort of transition. Because transition is uncomfortable, you will question yourself. You will wonder if you are too guarded now, too selective, too firm. But firmness is not coldness, it is clarity. You are clear about what you want, clear about what you deserve, clear about what you will no longer accept. And clarity is power. The old you survived, the old you survived, the old you feared endings, the new you is learning to thrive. The old you feared endings, the new you understands that some endings are beginnings in disguise. Growth is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious. Conscious of your patterns, conscious of your triggers, conscious of your needs. And when you are conscious, you have choice. You can choose healthier communication. You can choose patience over impulse. You can choose patience over impulse. You can choose self-respect over temporary comfort. Letting the old you go is not losing yourself. It is finding yourself beneath the fear, beneath the conditioning, beneath the habits formed in moments of insecurity. It is discovering that you are capable of loving without losing your center. And that is where real growth begins.